Hello, welcome to Unbelievable Tales.
He came to court in a wrinkled thrift store suit, just another quiet man waiting for his turn to speak. But behind the glasses and fake name was Elias Gray, a billionaire searching for the truth about his brother's death. The courtroom didn't notice him. The lawyers didn't care. Only one person did, a poor stenographer with tired eyes, who suddenly stopped typing and said one word that made him freeze. That moment would change both of their lives forever. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. He sat 3 rows back from the bench, still and silent, blending into the sea of worn-out coats and restless whispers. The courtroom was underheated, buzzing with low conversations, the shuffling of papers, and the tap-tap of heels crossing the linoleum. No one paid much attention to the tall man in the gray thrift store suit. His glasses were slightly crooked, his shoes scuffed, and his briefcase, faux leather, cracked at the corners, rested on his lap like an afterthought. But behind those calm blue eyes sat a name that could silence entire boardrooms. Elias Gray, the billionaire CEO. The man who once rebuilt 2 cities after the quake. The one who vanished from the press for months after his younger brother died, accidentally, at a luxury development site now worth billions. No one here recognized him. That was the point. To everyone else, he was just another witness for a zoning dispute buried inside a courthouse no one cared about, except him. Because deep beneath the legal jargon and land records, this was where the trail had ended, and where, if he was lucky, the truth might still live. The judge, an older man with the stiff air of someone used to being feared, droned on about procedural delays. The lawyers on both sides nodded like clockwork figures. But Elias didn't hear them. Not fully. He was watching the woman at the edge of the room. The stenographer. She was young, no more than mid-20s. Plain cardigan, modest posture. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes flicked only between her hands and the speakers. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Until the slip. It was fast, barely visible to anyone else. One of the defense attorneys mentioned a name, muffled, rushed. The judge asked him to repeat it. He didn't. He deflected, moved on. But Elias saw the girl's shoulders tighten. Her fingers hovered just slightly too long over the keys. And then she typed. And the name she entered into the record, Elias knew, hadn't been spoken aloud. Not once. His heart hitched just slightly. She knew something. He leaned forward just an inch, enough to see her profile better. There was tension in her jaw. She bit the inside of her cheek. No one else noticed. The lawyers were already arguing about setbacks and permits again. But her hands, they trembled for 3 seconds longer than necessary, and then kept typing. It was only a few minutes later that the hearing ended. The judge barked a reminder for decorum. The attorneys shook hands without meaning it. The public rustled to their feet. Elias didn't move, not until he saw her stand, gather her equipment, and quietly make her way along the back wall toward the exit. She passed by him without looking up. But as she did, a folded square of paper slipped from beneath the files clutched to her chest. It landed silently beside his foot. No one else saw it. No one except him. He waited 3 seconds, then bent forward as if adjusting his laces and picked it up. The fold was crisp, fresh, deliberate. He didn't open it until he was outside, beneath the awning of the courthouse, where the rain had started to fall. The wind howled like it had something to say. He stood facing the stone wall, opened the note with steady hands. 5 words, Handwritten, tight cursive. Your brother's death wasn't accidental. No name, no date, no details, just a ghost's whisper on a paper square. But it was enough to ignite something cold and electric in his chest. For months he'd been chasing silence. Lawyers who shrugged, officials who deflected, executives who knew nothing. He had combed reports, examined blueprints, checked every angle. Nothing ever stuck. Until now, because someone inside the courtroom knew. And that someone had just broken the first crack in the wall. He folded the note again, tucked it into the inner pocket of his coat, and walked into the rain, head low, heart pounding. Behind him, the courthouse doors shut with a metallic thud. But inside, a girl with a tired face and aching fingers sat back at her desk, staring at an empty keyboard, wondering if she'd just saved her soul or signed her own sentence. He returned the next morning earlier than most. The courthouse was quieter before 8 a.m., filled only with janitors, the low hum of vending machines, and the smell of burnt coffee. He didn't head for the main courtroom. Not yet. He waited in the hallway near the second-floor annex, watching the employees filter in, clerks, interns, a security guard with a limp. And then she appeared. Same cardigan, same tired eyes, same carefully bound hair. She walked quickly, clutching her bag tightly against her chest, not looking at anyone. But as she reached the stairwell landing, she paused. Her eyes flicked up and found his. She didn't stop, but for the briefest moment, something passed between them. Recognition, tension, and maybe regret. He followed her down the corridor, careful not to invade her space. She entered the stenographer's room, a small glassed-off office with machines, cables, and a single coffee maker that hadn't been cleaned in weeks. She dropped her bag, sat, and pulled out a notepad. Not the court-issued one. Her own. Worn. Corners bent. Elias waited, then knocked gently on the doorframe. She startled, just a little. Her hands moved to close the notebook, but he lifted his own hands in surrender. "I'm not here to make trouble," he said softly. She didn't answer. "I read your note." Still silence. "I'm not a reporter," he added, "and I'm not trying to expose you." At that, she looked up. Her eyes searched his face, slowly, deliberately. Then she closed her notebook, stood up, and opened the door wider. 5 minutes, she said. He stepped inside. She didn't ask who he was. Didn't need to. "You're not really a witness," she said quietly. "And that suit doesn't fit your posture." Elias smiled, just slightly. "I'm Elias Gray." She blinked once. No shock. She already knew. "My name's Lina." "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for what you wrote. I shouldn't have." Her voice cracked slightly. "But I couldn't stay quiet anymore." He nodded. "There's more, isn't there?" She hesitated, then walked to a filing cabinet, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a thin folder with 2 rubber bands keeping it shut. She handed it to him. "I've been keeping my own transcripts," she whispered. "Things I hear during breaks, in hallways, when the machine's not running." He opened the folder. Dozens of lines, notations, dates, quotes, names, and there it was. Gray was digging too deep. Kay told me to keep it clean. Handled. March 11th. Whispered in courtroom during lunch recess, defense table. Elias felt a chill. "Kay," he murmured. "Lawrence Keat," she confirmed. "He funds 3 of the firms connected to that development project. And the judge." He used to co-own the land before transferring it to Keats Shell Corporation. She pointed to a scribbled note. I traced it, but quietly. I didn't want to raise flags. Elias stared at her. Why keep it all? Her fingers curled slightly. Because I thought maybe someday someone would care. The words struck something in his chest. I do. They sat in silence for a few seconds, the folder open between them. Finally, Lina asked, what happens now? He met her gaze. Now, he said, you and I find out just how deep this goes. Together. And for the first time, she didn't look afraid. They met again the next day. Not in court. Not in the open. Elias left a note on Lina's desk, folded small under a broken paperweight. 8:45. Rooftop. North exit. Don't let anyone follow you. She almost didn't come, but something in her chest, some old, fragile instinct that hadn't died yet, pushed her feet toward the steel staircase and up 3 floors past the usual lunch spots, past the locked janitor closet, until the door opened with a clang and the wind met her face. He stood by the edge of the roof, his coat unbuttoned, tie loose, eyes scanning the skyline. The city stretched behind him, impressive, indifferent, like it didn't know it had buried a murder. I didn't think you'd show, he said without turning. I almost didn't. He smiled faintly. Same. She walked to stand beside him, the morning sun catching the gold strands in her hair. They both looked out for a moment in silence. Then Elias handed her a file. Security footage. Not from the courthouse, those were wiped. This is from across the street. A flower shop. Hidden camera. She opened the folder and gasped softly. It was blurry, time-stamped, but the angle was good enough. A man in a judge's robe, off hours, shook hands with another man in a sleek coat. Money passed between them. Then a car door. A license plate. Run the plate, she asked. I did. Registered to a company owned by Keats' niece. Same address where my brother's car was found torched. Her fingers tensed around the folder. You think they planned it all? I think my brother found something he wasn't supposed to, and someone in that courtroom wants it buried. A beat passed. Why tell me this? Lina whispered. Because I trust you, he said simply. And because I need someone who doesn't have a price. That stung, but only because it felt true. They stood together in the cold. 2 people who weren't meant to meet. One trying to prove the past wasn't dead. The other trying to believe the future could still be real. What do you need from me? She finally asked. Elias turned to face her fully. Keats on the schedule next week, he said. Private hearing. Sealed session. I need to know what's in that room. She blinked. They won't let me in. Then we find a way around it. The wind picked up, whipping her coat, but neither of them moved. Then softly, almost too quietly, Lina said, I was supposed to be invisible, you know? Just a hand behind a keyboard. Just another quiet girl in the background. Elias didn't smile this time. You're the only one they didn't see coming. She didn't know why, but those words stayed with her the rest of the day. Lina wore gray that day, like the walls, like the marble floor, like the silence in rooms where truth was supposed to live. She wasn't scheduled to work the sealed hearing, but she volunteered to fill in when someone from Courtroom 5 called in sick. No one questioned her. They never did. That was her strength. Invisible, efficient, forgettable, until now. She entered before the judge, placed her stenograph machine at the corner desk, eyes lowered, breath steady. The courtroom felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the way no one smiled. Maybe it was the way the curtains were drawn tighter. Elias wasn't in the room, but Keith was. The man carried himself like a king without a crown. Still dangerous, still aware of his throne. He sat behind the bench, leaned in, and spoke with practiced gravity. What we discuss today does not leave this room. Lina's fingers hovered over the keys. A lawyer began speaking. Something about jurisdiction. Then came the witness, a man in a department uniform. His voice was shaky, unsure. But what he said, she typed every word, her brain struggling to keep pace with what she was hearing. An asset fund, blackmail threats, names of donors Elias had once mentioned in passing. Payment traced back to the week before Daniel Gray died. Then Keith asked something low. Lina barely heard, but the answer echoed. Yes, we warned him, told him to stop looking. He didn't. The words came out like a confession, even though the man wasn't on trial. And Keith didn't flinch, didn't argue, just looked down at his pen. That's when Lina understood. This wasn't justice. It was cleanup. When the session adjourned, she sat there, heart pounding, unsure what to do. The official transcript wouldn't be released. What she had in her shorthand wasn't just evidence, it was a bomb. She left the room quietly, eyes ahead, knowing every step was dangerous now. Elias was waiting outside, leaning against a column near the exit. Their eyes met for half a second. She gave the smallest of nods and walked past. He followed 5 minutes later. They met again in the supply room, the one no one used anymore. She handed him a folded piece of paper. One word scribbled on it in pencil. Aegis. He looked up. What is this? Lina whispered. It's the shell company. The one that paid the witness. The same one that owned the car. Elias didn't speak for a long time. Then he did something unexpected. He reached forward and touched her hand. Thank you. Just that. But it stopped her breath. No one had thanked her in years. Not like that. Not for who she was underneath. They stood too close now. And yet, neither of them moved. Be careful, he said. If they know you know. They won't, she interrupted. They still don't see me. But Elias did. And that, she realized, scared her more than anything. By Tuesday morning, the weight of it all had shifted. Lina sat at her desk, transcribing an unrelated case, but her mind wasn't there. She kept seeing that man's face, the witness from Courtroom 5, and the way Keith had thanked him without words. Something bigger was being protected, and Elias wasn't going to walk away this time. She knew it when he appeared again in the hallway. No coat, no briefcase, just the same dark sweater and that flicker of fire behind his eyes. They met in the stairwell. No cameras there. Lina pulled out a slim folder from inside her bag. It's not just the payment trail, she whispered. It's the threats. The man who made the call to Daniel the day before he died? Same burner phone. I found the transcript, filed under a case that doesn't exist. Elias opened the folder slowly, page by page. His fingers trembled slightly. When he spoke, it wasn't rage that came through. It was grief. He was scared, he said. He called me that night. I didn't pick up. Lina looked up. You couldn't have known. No, Elias said quietly. But I could have been there. There was a silence between them that hurt. Not because of what was said, but because of everything neither could fix. Later that afternoon, Elias entered Courtroom 4 again, not as a witness this time, but as a man ready to speak truth, regardless of consequence. Lina wasn't allowed inside, but she stayed nearby, seated on the hallway bench, clutching her machine, pretending to revise notes. The doors were closed for over an hour. When they opened, the air had changed. Keith stormed out first, red-faced, phone to his ear. Elias came out slower, quieter. He didn't see her at first, but when he did, he didn't smile. He just came closer and sat beside her like it was the only place in the world he wanted to be. "They're calling for a formal inquest," he said. "I named the shell company, gave them names. Don't know if it'll be enough." "It's a start," she whispered. He nodded, then added, "They'll come after me next." Lina didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a deep breath and handed him her notebook. Not a transcript, a letter, handwritten. "I've kept my head down my whole life," she said, "but I couldn't anymore. You didn't just see what they did to your brother, Elias. You saw me, and now I see you." He unfolded the note, read it in silence. At the bottom, one line in softer ink. "If they silence you, I'll keep telling the story." Elias looked at her. No walls left, no courtroom between them, just two people who had finally stepped into the light. And in that light, something began. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the quiet beginning of trust. The press got hold of the hearing by morning. They didn't know his name at first, only that a mystery man had walked into a courtroom and named names tied to a dead corporate executive. But by noon, someone leaked the truth. Elias Gray, CEO of Graylight Holdings, missing from the public eye for nearly 2 years. The headlines spun fast. Some praised him, others questioned motives. But what they couldn't deny was that the chain of evidence he'd provided triggered a series of raids that same afternoon. The judge ordered a temporary freeze on assets tied to the shell company. Keith disappeared from court records, but Elias didn't run. Instead, he walked right into the press briefing room at City Hall and read a single powerful statement. "I failed to protect my brother in life. I will not fail to honor him in truth." He didn't answer questions. He didn't smile for cameras. He just walked out the back, to the alley where Lina stood waiting, wrapped in a coat 2 sizes too big, holding a cup of bad courthouse coffee. "You'll need something better than that," Elias murmured. She handed him the cup anyway. "Figured you'd be thirsty." They leaned on the wall, no words between them for a moment, just shared breath in winter air. Finally, Lina asked, "What happens now?" Elias exhaled slowly. "I step down from the board, face the civil suits, maybe the Senate hearings, maybe worse. And after that?" He looked at her, eyes tired, but no longer empty. "I find out who I am when I'm not running." Lina smiled. "And if you ever forget, I'll remind you." He turned toward her, and for the first time since that day in Courtroom 4, he reached out. Not with a handshake, but with a hand gently brushing hers. They didn't kiss. It wasn't the time. But when Lina laced her fingers between his, it said enough. Not a fairy tale. Not a headline, just a beginning. Weeks passed. The storm faded. And one afternoon, in a quiet bookstore 2 towns over, a small group gathered for a writing workshop. They weren't there to talk about grammar or plot. They were there to learn how to tell their truth. At the front of the room, Lina adjusted her scarf and welcomed them in. Behind the last row of seats, Elias stood by the door. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't own the building. But in his hand was a notebook, full of words he was finally ready to say. And in the front row sat a girl who once thought her voice didn't matter. Now she helped others find theirs. not because she was loud, but because she had once dared to speak. A single word, and someone had listened.
Bye, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.